We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and wait a minute, how did this happen? We're smarter than this. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined as always by my co-host, Darth Williams. How are we doing today, Andrew?
You know.
I do know, Andrew, because we are creeping up on this holiday season. I don't know what to call the pre-Thanksgiving era of the holiday season, because I feel like it's Thanksgiving to the New Year. It's like the official holiday season. This is like the ramp up to it, you know. Retail stores have the music playing, but people aren't lighting up their yards just yet, at least not around me. There's some decorations out, but it's not full force, but we're getting there. Most importantly, though, is eggnog is on the shelves at stores. I've got literally two different brands in my fridge right now. There's like a store brand, HEB, that I enjoy, but then I always treat myself to like the glass bottle eggnog, like the local farmer type eggnog stuff. But I love this stuff, Andrew. How about you? Big fan?
Not really. But then again, I've never really had it, so I don't really know. But I've never been much of an alcohol guy. So,
well, I alcoholic eggnog is fine, and I've certainly had it, but I buy it off the grocery store shelf and drink it that way. I don't even spike it or anything. I like it as is. Just a nice holiday drink.
All egg, no nog. I get it. But
good.
No, I think the pre-Thanksgiving time is just called November.
Weird. November.
November. I don't know what Vember is, but apparently we hate it. But it is not allowed. But no, I did see some decorations when I was just down in Texas recently, and I'm starting to see it. Like the airports had up. Like I was just in Midway Airport. I was just in Hobby. They've got the Christmas stuff up. It's starting to happen, and I like walk outside to go to work, and in the whistle of the wind, I hear Mariah Carey. It's coming. It's there. So it is. I'm excited because I love Christmas. So I'm getting ready. I'm feeling it.
Truly the most wonderful time of the year. But we're not here to talk about holidays.
Andy
Andrew.
Williams once said.
Oh, that's it?
You know, he sings "It's the most wonderful time of the year."
Okay, Andy
my
Williams.
name is Andrew Williams.
I say that's your name. You never went by Andy though, right?
No, except people.
Is this
I just got
a joke you
Go
heard
on.
often? Or is this something that
A certain demographic likes to make this joke. That
Okay.
demographic is old.
Yeah.
But
I don't think like on the playground growing up, kids were like
No.
Andy Williams.
Moon River? No.
Sing a song,
but,
Andy.
No, I have people call me Andy, but it's not, I think, because of that. They just assume people named Andrew go by Andy. Like, I just got an official promotion at work today, and the offer letter, the email, the lady said, "Andy, congratulations." And I was like, "Who's Andy?" But
That's such a weird thing
this
to
Andy is.
assume.
It is, and it happens a lot. Like Liz runs into it a lot. Like Elizabeth is obviously the name she writes on everything, but people at work will still just assume she goes by a shorter name. And it's like, yeah, that's awful presumptuous of you. As a Chris, I assume you also deal with this endlessly. So,
Yeah, but I'm fine. I prefer being called Chris, I guess. Like, I'm not offended if you use Christopher, but that one I think is a little less presumptuous to assume they go by Chris. I do have people ask me sometimes, Chris or Christopher, which I guess I appreciate, but I don't know. That one, Christopher to Chris, seems so much more common than Andrew to Andy. What if you went by Drew? What if you were a Drew? What if you were one of those people?
I could go by AJ.
What if I was a Topher? You know, maybe people shouldn't be assuming these things.
They shouldn't. You can, it's not difficult to ask someone what they want to be called, but as we have discovered in our society, man, it's not okay.
Well, that is also not what we're here to talk about today, because each week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Star Wars prequel month, and this week we are talking the 2005 film Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Andrew, what is your history with this film? I've got to assume by now you saw it in theaters.
I did. I'm certain I did. I've definitely seen it before, have revisited it occasionally. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff from this one that got memed over the years. Plenty of things. But probably the one that if I had revisited any, this is probably the one I revisited the most. It's generally seen as the best of the prequels. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but I saw it in theaters, definitely not to the level I saw any of the others, but this would have been 2005, was it? So I'm graduating high school, have just graduated high school. I'm literally within days of graduating high school, or have just done it. It is imminent. So, might not have been cool to go see Star Wars. But I know I saw it. But yeah.
Yeah, but
so
this is the PG-13
occasionally.
Star Wars movie. This is the cool one.
Oh man. But so I know I saw it. I've gone back to it occasionally. Like I said, probably the best of the prequels, but that's about the extent of it.
I did not see this in theaters. In fact, I did not see this for a very long time. I saw episode 1 in theaters. We've discussed it. I know I saw the second one back in the day. I don't remember if it was in theaters, but then I just never saw this one because by 2005, I just wasn't into Star Wars as a whole, honestly, but certainly not the prequel train. So I just didn't see it. And I can't say I didn't know what happened because even, without seeing the movie, you kind of get a general idea of what's going to happen. But, the exact details, I felt like I was relatively spoiler free by the time I did eventually see this, maybe 10 years after the fact, finally getting around to watching it. And watching it for this podcast is probably the second time I ever watched it, but the reputation certainly preceded that viewing. As you said, I think it's generally seen as the best of the prequels, as our friend of the show and former guest Brian Key said that it's maybe now like a 60-40 split with episode 1. Episode 1 certainly has its fans, but I think by and large, end of the day, you do a poll, Revenge of the Sith is gonna come out on top. And I love the title. I do want to say that. I think it's pretty common knowledge now, common Star Wars trivia, that episode 6 was originally Revenge of the Jedi. Now, I've heard the title was changed from studio pressure because they didn't want it to sound like a Hong Kong film, which sounds a little bizarre. George Lucas himself, what he says is that he realized like a true Jedi wouldn't seek revenge, and so that's why he changed it. Which sounds, I agree where he's coming from, but also George Lucas has a way of sort of rewriting what he quote unquote always intended. So I don't know, not sure where the truth lies, but to bring that title back around to Revenge of the Sith, I think is pretty fun.
Yeah, I think so too. The end of the day, for whatever reason, whether there's supposedly a poster out there that existed that said Revenge of the Jedi. Was it Studio Movie Grill, I think? Like the first one that opened up here in Houston. They had Han Solo and Carbonite, like a replica behind the bar, and they had a Revenge of the Jedi poster. A replica, obviously, but from what I could tell, a legit, as you're saying, designed the actual poster. So one exists. I don't know how often it was. That's probably like if there was a movie poster Holy Grail, it's probably that and the teasers for Tim Burton's Superman movie. But yeah, so it was out there. It's like I said, whatever reason it was changed. You don't know who to believe. You don't know if it's George Lucas, and whoever. They all write their own story. I think it is cool to bring it up because this is the ultimate Revenge of the Sith. This is them enacting their plan and succeeding for all intents and purposes. So I think it ends up being kind of the perfect title. Whereas, Return of the Jedi is the Return of the Jedi. It is the reemergence of the Jedi as the balancing force in the universe and the defeat of the Sith. So happenstance, call it fate, call it karma, whatever.
This movie was released May 19th, 2005, made on a budget of $113 million. At the box office, it brought in $849.9 million. Holy smokes. That's a lot of money. A huge jump from episode 2. It doesn't quite hit episode 1, but people are coming back to see how he wraps up this trilogy. Critically, it is the best received of the prequels. It holds an 80% score on Rotten Tomatoes, which honestly, I knew this had the reputation of being the best one, but that's still higher than I expected. Interestingly, though, audience score, 66%. Like, I really thought this one would have people championing it. Honestly, that just seems reversed. I would have believed a 66 critic, 80% audience is what I felt like this was going to be, but it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, that actually surprised me too. I kind of expected it to be a little bit more positive on the fan side, but I knew it was fresh. I didn't realize it was that fresh. And yeah, the audience, I would have figured they skewed higher, but it is unexpected.
Creatively, Andrew, you're not going to believe this. This movie,
what?
It's written and directed by George Lucas, who we've obviously talked about extensively this month. Creator of Star Wars and the prequel trilogy, the most hands-on creative output of his entire filmography. The most George Lucas movies to ever George Lucas. This is his vision through and through. These 3 little indie movies that he produced in a span of 6 years. I don't know if we have anything new to say about the guy.
Not really. In the ensuing weeks that have passed since we've talked about George Lucas, it turns out no new information has been revealed about the man. Shocking, really. I do like this one because I know we've talked about it probably already on previous episodes, but I do like that just some interesting people got asked to direct this movie, or got asked to direct Return of the Jedi, and I just don't know that he ever, and that kind of continues here. Like, he offers people all these movies all the time, and it's just funny to me that for these, Return of the Jedi, we've talked about how David Cronenberg and David Lynch and all these other people were picked before he even got to the guy who ended up directing it, Richard Marquand. And then with all the prequels, it's just funny that, he sought out all these different people, and it's just, even Revenge of the Sith, no exception. But it's always wild to me that the man just really doesn't want to do this part. He just really doesn't want to direct these movies. But this is definitely him at the full peak of his powers, written and directed. Nobody in his way. This is his unfiltered vision for what he saw this story as being. And hey, that's cool.
Well, then, Andrew, it's just time that we jump into it and talk about all the positives, everything we like about Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Are you ready?
Yes.
After Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker dispatch of Count Dooku, the Jedi Knights aim to end the Clone Wars by destroying General Grievous. Anakin, however, is tempted to the dark side of the Force when Palpatine reveals himself to be a Sith Lord and promises Anakin the power to prevent his wife Padme from dying. Together, Palpatine and Anakin kill nearly every Jedi in the galaxy. As Padme prepares to give birth to Anakin's children, Obi-Wan Kenobi takes a final stand against his former student. It finally happened, Andrew. Anakin's fall to the dark side. Episode 3.
We knew it was coming.
Here we are. Did you? I was still holding out hope that he would, make the right, choose the right path.
Yeah, I guess with no knowledge of what comes after this, it really is up in the air. Ultimately, what happens to his character.
It's gotta be an interesting place to be.
Were you waiting for the bait and switch? Turns out somebody else was actually Darth Vader.
Someone like pushes him out and gets into the Darth Vader suit.
You shove Anakin Skywalker off the roof, you become Darth Vader. It's Santa Claus rules.
James Earl Jones puts on the suit at the end. Weird place to be writing this movie, where you've got to end it in a specific place. You've got to get there and still be entertaining, still be exciting. Like knowing where a story is going doesn't necessarily make it a bad story, but it is tough. I think it's a tough place to be from a writing perspective, but by most people's accounts, the man pulls it off. This is probably, in general audiences view, the best review to the prequel series.
Yeah, I think this is largely seen as the most solid of the prequel series. You've gotten I guess the nice way of putting it is that you've gotten all the pieces into place. Now you just get to knock them all down, and that's the funnest part, or the most fun part of it, is getting to kind of come in now and be like, okay, I finally gotten all the chess pieces into place. They're exactly where I wanted to be. Now kiss. And I mean, this movie's basically nonstop action, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, it opens with a big action scene. We get lightsaber action almost immediately in this movie. There's tons of lightsaber fights in this movie. Like, there's at least 4 ones that I can think of off the top of my head that are not necessarily short. And so the movie is pretty much 90-0 the whole time. And in that regard, I think people, almost on that alone, enjoy it the most, because all the pieces finally fall into place, and it's pretty much just a nonstop thrill ride. So,
Andrew, we're going to talk about that thrill ride and all the best scenes and what we love about this movie. But first, we're going to talk about this cast, as we always do. And we're going to start with the high point, best casting, best performance of the film, because every episode, we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, so kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Star Wars, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith?
Such a long title. This one is it's a bit of an interesting one, because there's a lot of people that have to do a lot of work here, but I gotta go with my gut. I think this makes it 2-time award-winning, but Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think he's doing some intense heavy lifting here as we go through this movie, playing Obi-Wan kind of in those final stages when he kind of witnesses the fall of Anakin, and is basically powerless to do anything about it. The emotion he feels, the heartbreak he feels, I think all of that comes through extremely well. I think this is definitely probably the movie where I think he kind of cemented that his portrayal of Obi-Wan was iconic on its own. Not that I think he was ever kind of living in the shadow of Alec Guinness, but I think this movie definitely kind of was like, all right, he's also Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he has made the character his own, and he stands on his own now. And I think this movie is a large part of that. So I know we've talked about him extensively at this point, several movies worth, so there's not a whole lot. You don't need to deep dive his career or anything. But for me, it's McGregor as Obi-Wan. He's got a lot to shoulder in this movie, and he is up to the task.
Man, I have to agree. I've got to give my Mark Strong Award to Ewan McGregor. I was considering someone else, but and obviously we'll get to that performance, but I feel like I was just trying to give it to someone else because I just gave it to Ewan McGregor for this character in the last movie, but that shouldn't take away from how great his performance still is. He is still the absolute standout. He is so good, and I mean, you're right. He's really, I don't know if he was ever in the shadow of Alec Guinness, but certainly if he was, he steps out of it here. He's so good. His relationship and love for Anakin Skywalker is just as realized, if not more so, than Padme and Anakin. Like I buy his relationship with Anakin, yeah, probably more, honestly, and in large part due to Ewan's performance here, and you get it all. You get him kind of having fun in the first half of this movie, taking on General Grievous and out on his own, being a badass, and a lot of the prequel memes that have become popular are from here, like the hello there. But the second half, he's just clearly tormented and torn and pleading with Anakin.
The second half of this movie is rough, man. Like, we'll talk about it more.
God,
man,
we'll get there.
It is.
We'll get there, but I gotta agree. Ewan McGregor, now, like you said, a 2-time Mark Strong Award winner, well deserved. Andrew, let's talk about Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. Obviously, we discussed this last week, his first turn as the character, and we both kind of settled on, there might be problems with the performance, but you can't put it all on his shoulders, and I think that's sort of I think a lot of people have kind of come to that conclusion or agree with that. But what I want to say is, between the two performances, I think this movie is far superior. I think this is definitely his better turn as Anakin Skywalker. This is where I was tempted to throw a Mark Strong Award, because I've got no complaints. And I think the big difference between the last movie and this one is episode 2, he's got to be Anakin, he's got to be tempted by the dark side, you've got to see some flashes of rage, and he's got to be a boy, a young man. It was 18, 19-year-old. Like, they play up his boyish features so much. It's a lot. But now we jump forward a few years. Hayden Christensen beefs up for this role. He looks fantastic. He looks intimidating. He looks scary. They give him that cool scar, and now it's all about that temptation to the dark side. We don't have to see him super boyish. Even the romance now is established. We don't have to see him chasing Padme throughout the whole movie. Like, they really dial in to what we need to focus on, which is his fall to the dark side. And I think he plays it really well. I think he looks, once he really breaks bad, once he goes full evil, I think he looks awesome. And I suddenly, for the first time in the prequel series, buy this guy as the man who will be Vader, or becomes Vader in this. It finally connects the link, and I think he's up to the task. It took us a while to get here, but I was pleasantly surprised to revisit this one and be like, all those complaints that we all have about this characterization or performance, I think it's, for me anyway, I don't speak for anybody else, mostly localized in episode 2. Episode 3, I like what he's doing.
Yeah, and I think I would like to think that's the larger assumption. This is set 3 years after Attack of the Clones, so he's an older character. Obviously, war has a way of aging people, but at this point, the resentment's building, the anger's building, and so he's able to just kind of lean into it. And like you said, once he goes full bad, like it's pretty gnarly. Like he's into it, and like the kind of cold, calculating measure of it that's everywhere. It works. It, like you said, by the end of this movie, you believe this man becomes Darth Vader, and then you realize that this dude gets basically encased in a robot suit before he's 25. And I'm like, that's rough. That's a rough way to live.
And then you jump to episode 6, and the helmet finally comes off after 25 years. Andrew,
Yeah.
imagine the smell inside that suit.
To be fair, he takes off the helmet sometimes. We see that in somewhere. It's in episode 5 or something.
The back of his head briefly, yeah.
The back of his head briefly. But yeah, it's the smell. Imagine the smell.
That's what's happening in that chamber. It's just like a deodorizing. It just lifts the helmet off, lets just literally steamy dark side must out.
No, I hate it. I hate it all, Chris. I hate it so much. But anyway, yeah, I think he's up to the task here. Like you said, you kind of buy this is Vader here, especially during that last act. Like the anger he shows, everything. The kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that ends up happening where the whole thing is that like he's trying to save the ones he loves, but in doing that he creates the self-fulfilling prophecy where it is the actions he takes to save them that ultimately doom them. And it is I think it's pretty well done. So props.
Natalie Portman returns as Padme Amidala, and I've spoken all month about how much I like this character, how badass she is, how smart she is. That continues to be the case. However, most of her story here is about the romance. Her and Anakin have the secret marriage and now secret pregnancy. They debate about coming public, but before long, it's all about she realizes what's going on with Anakin, has fallen to the dark side. It's all about the romance here. And there seems to be, I will say there was a plot where she's essentially helping form what will become the Rebel Alliance, which was cut from the film. I can understand why. It's already over 2 hours and we want to focus on Anakin's fall, etc. But I do like that for the character. That is definitely where I could see this character heading, being the spark that starts the rebellion. So in my head canon, I'm maintaining that because that's what I've loved about this character throughout the movies is how intelligent they are, how wise they are, and how willing they are to fight for what's right. But as far as the romance stuff, still doing a great job. Really playing up the tragedy. I mean, this movie is a tragedy through and through, and no one probably gets harder or hit harder with that than she does. And Natalie Portman is appropriately anguished, let's say.
I agree. She's got like I said, she's kind of witnessing the decline of Anakin in real time, and she's got to react to that. She's got to play off that, and by the end of this movie, you can the sadness and the anguish and the heartbreak is palpable, and you can see just like there's a moment where like it shatters. You can see the mirror shatters where she just can't do it anymore. Like she knows, like because Obi-Wan's telling her what's happened, and she doesn't believe it. She doesn't want to believe it. Why would you? And then ultimately she realizes, she's like, no, this is all true. He is something else now, and devastating. And Portman is up to that task.
Ian McDiarmid once again plays Palpatine or Darth Sidious. Talk about someone we finally get to see break bad. We've known this was coming the entire time. The movies have played coy. They know, we know, but the movies aren't letting the characters in the movie know. Like, it's a surprise to the characters on screen. I don't think it's ever meant to be a surprise to the audience that this guy is evil. But it finally happens, and I'll be honest, I don't mean for this to sound backhanded or anything. I think Ian McDiarmid's done a great job throughout this entire series, but it's not until this movie where, like, I get it. Okay, I get why people respond to this performance and this character so much. Whenever he really leans into being a Sith Lord, being evil, whenever he uses that voice, do it.
No.
He just goes full tilt. He just goes for it.
He does.
And it's over the top, and I absolutely I love it. But beyond just like the cheesiness and camp factor, this character is such a master manipulator. I mean, you've been seeing them pull the strings through all 3 movies, and then his final grand plan converting Anakin to the dark side, and it starts with him like revealing himself to be a Sith Lord, but he's so confident that he's gonna be able to pull this guy over to his side, and he does, and it's just again, I'll use that word, it's tragedy.
Yeah. It is definitely tragic. There's no doubt about it. The performance of McDermott as Sidious when he goes full tilt is just, it's wild. And you can tell that dude's having like a blast doing it, because he just truly, like, the voice he adopts, like, this dude's just been dying to like be all sniveling. And I love that they like scar him so that he looks older when he already looked old. Like, it's just so kind of funny to me. They're like, he needs to look more decrepit as the Emperor, so let's do that.
Yeah, so
it's just funny to me.
When you watch the original trilogy, or at least this is my assumption, I assume he looks that way because he's insanely old. I assume like he's a 500-year-old creature and just insanely wrinkled. But this movie seems to imply he's just radically deformed from his evilness, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, because I assumed he was, but I mean, like, even then, like, you look at him here, like, he's clearly in his 50s or his 60s. By the end of Return of the Jedi, that's another 30 years. Like by then, I just assumed he was old. Like, and I assumed that's what the deal was. But yeah, here, and they work with it. Obviously, the scarring is meant to be like the further proof of the plot by the Jedi. Like, now he gets to go before them and be like, see what they've done to me, which is another kind of firm lock that the Jedi have turned on us, and the Jedi are the problem. It furthers his takeover, so it serves a point. But yeah, I just assumed he was old. So when they were like, so he gets scarred, I was like, all right. But by that point, he's just full on like Darth Sidious, and he's clearly having a blast doing it.
Samuel L. Jackson once again plays Mace Windu, the purple lightsaber Jedi. Meets his end here. It's very sad. How would you characterize Mace Windu? He's on the council. He doesn't, Yoda's thing is that he's incredibly wise and strongest with the Force. That's his thing. What's Mace Windu's thing? He just seems deadly serious all the time.
Badass motherfucker. But it's like,
yeah,
the way the character is often described is that like he's second to Yoda basically as far as Jedi go. Like he's that good and that powerful. So yeah, he's the guy that like I see him as kind of like the minute he like sits forward on his chair, you're in trouble type. Like, yeah, the minute like he makes any kind of move at all, you're just like, oh, this is about to go very badly for me. And yeah, that's always kind of been my assumption, is that he almost the enforcer, if you will. Like he's someone that like I don't enjoy doing this, but I will if I have to. And it's he gets a big point here because his death is kind of the moment of Anakin's turn. Like that's kind of the moment that Anakin is kind of gone. He's bought into what Sidious is telling him, and it is Windu's death that essentially turns Anakin to the dark side, or is at least kind of the last moments of it. Or basically stopping Windu and allowing the Emperor to kill him is what basically turns Anakin fully. And it's wild, but I'm just saying, we didn't see that body hit the ground, man.
He's still flying through space.
Some say he's still falling to this day. But, yeah, I know Samuel L. Jackson has made, overtures about wanting to play the character again, and I'm sure if they wanted to, they could figure out something. But I certainly wouldn't. Of all the Star Wars stuff they're doing, I certainly wouldn't have a problem with it.
Jimmy Smits plays Bail Organa. He is, of course, a senator from Alderaan. And we know where this story is going, right? As soon as this character is introduced, we know who he's going home with. We know what his ultimate fate is. We get it. But I like that they still managed to make this like a real, fully realized character. He is just a consummate good guy. You really see that he has a lot of heart throughout the movie. So at the end, whenever he adopts Princess Leia, she's going to a good home, Andrew.
Yeah, he's Organa. The minute they say his name is Organa, you know where this is going. You know what's going to happen. You know that this is who Leia is going to end up with. Yeah, Jimmy Smits did show up in episode 2. Don't know that we talked about him there, but it was a pretty bit part. He gets a much bigger part here. He's basically one of the few members of the Senate who doesn't buy what's happening. He doesn't believe that this is a Jedi plot. He knows the Jedi. He doesn't believe that this is them trying to overtake it, and actually assists Obi-Wan and Yoda kind of in their missions to kind of survive. Jimmy Smits just got to return to the character in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series they did a couple years ago. Thought that was super cool. Jimmy Smits looking pretty good for his age. Don't know that they even needed to de-age him, but it's cool. So he's still out there playing the character. I liked that. The Obi-Wan Kenobi series actually I liked pretty much. I would consider buying it if I owned any physical Star Wars, which I only own one physical Star Wars. So
what's the one physical Star Wars you own? Oh, Last Jedi, of course. So Last Jedi, of course. We've had this discussion. Of course.
I gotta own the Rian Johnson filmography, bro. It's but yeah,
I think it's the only one
like you said,
physically I own too. Actually, now that I think about it,
I used to have.
I have a Force Awakens Blu-ray around here somewhere, maybe.
I think I used to have the 6. I don't know that I ever went beyond that. No, I definitely had. I definitely had Force Awakens at one point, because I remember buying a steelbook for it, and then when I purged everything, I didn't keep anything. But then turns out you can get Last Jedi steelbooks 4K really cheap off eBay, which you're lost, dudes. Anyway, but like you said, there's a lot of heart to this character. He's the one that's clearly on their side, ends up becoming a major factor of the Rebel Alliance. Very cool.
Most of these characters we've talked about already, but of course, you gotta acknowledge they play such a large part here. Let's just round it out with a quick rundown here. Christopher Lee returns as Count Dooku, Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, Kenny Baker gets in there as R2-D2 for a few shots, and then Frank Oz as Yoda. What is there to say about these 4? Great, awesome.
Yeah, they're all great. Like I said, Christopher Lee gets a few moments to chew some scenery as Dooku in this opening and the opening kind of action sequence we have. Gets to remind us that he's pretty good at this Jedi thing or this Force thing, but ultimately does get taken out by Anakin, which was all part of Sidious's plan. That's actually the most interesting part about this movie to me, is just how many things in this movie were all part of the plan. One of those things where I'm like, if any of this had gone wrong, it all unravels. So good for him, I guess. But Christopher Lee, awesome. Christopher Lee just beats up Obi-Wan in this movie a lot. Like, Obi-Wan doesn't get a single moment that he gets an upper hand in either movie, that he really has the upper hand on Dooku.
Yeah.
Dooku just stomps that dude every time. The squash match, if you will. But obviously Anthony Daniels in C-3PO, kind of fully formed now, back into his mask, his classic look. R2-D2, and then Frank Oz as Yoda. I gushed about Frank Oz last week. I don't need to do it again. But
Andrew, you have Wikipedia pulled up by chance? You know Wikipedia?
Maybe. Why?
The C-3PO page. The very first line is just pissing me off.
Or C-3PO. No, I hate that.
That's horrible, right?
I hate that.
It's C-3PO, which of course is C dash the number 3 PO, or C-S-E-E dash T-H-R-E-E-P-I-O. C-3PO. Here's the thing. I know a lot of characters call him 3PO for short. So if you want to do 3PO as a nickname, fine. But C, just rewriting it as S-E-E? No. I refuse to acknowledge that as an acceptable way to acknowledge this character.
No,
C-3PO.
I don't believe anybody does that. I that sounds made up to me.
On a Wikipedia page? Just made up information on Wikipedia?
There's no way you do that. You just go onto the internet and lie, man? Nobody does that.
Andrew, I think that covers our main players. If there's anybody else that needs a shout out, we can certainly do it as we talk about scenes, but it's time to do just that. Talk about the scenes of this film. We're going to start with the high point, the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So Andrew, go ahead and kick us off here. In your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Jedi?
I mentioned earlier that this movie goes very heavy on the lightsaber fights, but I gotta go with our final throwdown: Obi-Wan versus Anakin for seemingly all the marbles. On Mustafar, I believe it is. I think that's the planet it is. Mustafar, yeah, the lava planet, which dope location, dope idea, dope setting, looks super cool, makes for a great backdrop for this. Ultimately, where Vader also builds his temple, which just shows you how much of an emo Vader really is. That like he built his clubhouse on the planet he was almost decapitated and killed on. It's like, I'm gonna build it here. Everyone will know how tough I am. Anyway, but this is like, so this is the moment. Anakin is turned. It's been revealed. Obviously, it's been revealed now that it was always a double ruse, basically. Obviously, Sidious was on one side commanding the Trade Federation. Palpatine was on the other side commanding the Republic. He purposely pitted them against each other. Now that he's got what he wants, which is the supreme power, he takes out the Jedi. He kills the Separatists. It's all just the new Galactic Empire now. So at this point, all of that has happened. Some of Yoda's fight with Sidious is concurrent to this, but he fails as well. And ultimately, this is it. It's Anakin versus Obi-Wan, with Padme kind of in the background. Anakin is gone completely at this point. He's Darth Vader. He's gone. He's not coming back. Obi-Wan doesn't want to do this. You can tell that there's pain. He doesn't want to do this fight, but he has to. Because he knows that if he leaves Anakin alive, something bad's going to happen. Which, follow through then, man. Don't half arm and half leg this. You got to finish it. This fight it's through everything. It's got this lava planet Mustafar backdrop, which just makes for a really cool, unique thing that we've never really seen before. Obviously, the blue lightsabers contrasted with the orange and reds of the backgrounds. Just makes it really pop and stand out. This whole place is like collapsing and crumbling down as they're fighting. So you get these cool, big set pieces. It's all really awesome. And then ultimately we get kind of a classic meme moment. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. And Anakin tries and gets sliced to bits. And then it's not just Obi-Wan's sadness at this point. The anger of Anakin as well, because he truly believes that Obi-Wan is what has stolen everything from him. He believes Obi-Wan poisoned Padme against him. He believes that Obi-Wan is the reason all of this happened. He blames the Jedi for everything. And that anger and that rage is palpable through Hayden's performance here, and the heartbreak on Obi-Wan's side through Ewan. I'm going to allow it. But it's just great. And like I said, it's funny to me because, again, I point out that like outside Return of the Jedi, the original movies don't go super hard on the lightsabers, whereas these movies do. And I think it created that perception that like all the Star Wars movies need to have these bang out, drawn out lightsaber fights. Yeah. This movie, I think, really sets that expectation because there's so many of them, and some of them go for so long. Like this is like a 10-minute plus lightsaber fight in this movie that just they keep coming back to, and then ultimately Anakin succumbs and is left to essentially burn alive. It's pretty messed up, honestly, that Obi-Wan just kind of leaves him there, like to burn alive on this coast of this lava beach. But at that point, he can't bring himself to do what needs to be done. He can't bring himself to be the one to deliver the killing blow to Anakin. It's still, through all of this, knowing everything that he's done, he still can't do it. And that pain comes through as well. So this is when the movie is, dare I say, firing on all cylinders. Lavaing on all cylinders. I'm getting out of this. It's gone poorly. But it's for me, this is the scene I remember the most. Hot. It's hot. It's real hot. But this is the scene that stands out to me the most. Even before I rewatched it, I remember most of the scene pretty vividly. There's that one scene where they're both just randomly twirling their lightsabers, not hitting each other for some reason.
Yes,
and then,
yes.
Like they're building momentum. Like they're charging up the special, and then they just hit each other and cancel it out. But it's just cool, man. It's the fight you expected these two to have. And you kind of knew it was coming. Like you knew it had to happen. And it doesn't disappoint as far as I'm concerned.
It's really good. You actually have Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen doing their own lightsaber work. They prepare for this extensively, and it shows. You get to get all the nice wide shots and get the actual actors' faces in there. And this lightsaber fight is everything. You got, obviously, classic sword fight style fight. But then they're jumping over lava rivers and riding on debris as it melts. They're riding these little, what do you call it? It always reminds me of, like, there's Ninja Turtles levels where you ride, like, the, sewer surfing or whatever.
Sewer surfing.
Yeah. Riding those little pods or whatever. But ultimately, I mean, the story that's playing out here is just, it's so sad. Obviously, just the radicalization of Anakin Skywalker with manipulation and misinformation is just a tragic thing to watch. I'm real struck by Obi-Wan continuously referring to Anakin as his brother. Not even like little brother, young brother, just they're brothers at this point after going through what they've gone through together. Because in the last movie, it's definitely master-student relationship. And he's still his mentor, but he basically sees him as equal, on equal grounds now. Not literally because he has the high ground, but, as an equal, as a brother. And I just think it's really interesting as he laments how sad this is, that it's never like, you're never talking down to him, never looking at him as like a kid that, went the wrong way. It's just, I've lost my brother. Right. It just makes it all the more sad, as if this movie needed help being more sad. But, Andrew, this is the great pick for best scene. There's a lot of great action scenes. We're going to highlight them. We're going to talk about them. I'm going to do that thing I do sometimes, where I'm going to zero in real specific for a favorite scene. Andrew, George Lucas makes this choice that I think is just out of nowhere, but in the best way possible, because I absolutely love it. And I want to make sure I'm getting the moment right. But for a lot of this movie, Anakin and Padme are separated. We see them reunite briefly in the beginning, and then they spend a large part of the movie not on the same planet, not together, not talking. As Anakin is slowly pulled to the dark side, and Padme is left to worry and deal with the reality that she's about to be giving birth to these kids. There's this scene where Anakin, they're on the same planet. I guess they're on Coruscant. They're in different skyscrapers, and Anakin's looking out the window, given context clues, because there's no dialogue here, thinking about what he's doing, making a turn to the dark side, what it means for Padme. He knows it's not right deep down inside, but he's doing it for the right reasons. He's torn. He hasn't fully fallen to the dark side yet. Padme is also looking out because she can feel that Anakin is becoming lost and perhaps going down a bad path. But this is all me extrapolating this because, again, there's no dialogue here. It's just two characters in these long shots looking out the window. And we switch the other character, and when it's on Anakin, he's taking up the right side of the frame. When it's on Padme, she's taking the left side of the frame. It's almost like the Force bridging scenes from the sequel trilogy, but I don't think that's the implication here. I don't think they're actually connecting through the Force, but they are thinking of each other and feeling each other's emotions. If Padme breaks down in the tears, then we move on to the next scene. Like, it's never... You expect a character to walk in, like, oh, I was just thinking about blah, 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 and they verbalize. They never verbalize it. They never say what they're thinking about. And for a movie this bombastic and full of action and full of so much stuff going on, to take the time to sit in these characters' feelings and let these actors act. Just no one else in the scene, and just I imagine he told them, like, hey, just everything your character is going through right now, I need to see it in your face, and you sit in it for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
wild that's happening in this movie of all movies. I don't mean that as an insult. It's just, I didn't expect that scene in this movie. It really stood out to me. It really struck me, and I wanted to highlight it. This is my favorite thing this movie does.
I think this is a great pick. I think those are the interesting moments. Like you said, the force bridging scenes definitely, I think, get a little bit of a proto version here. This movie does play a lot on people sensing things through the force. Like there's lots of moments, like when Order 66 first gets executed, that Yoda notices. He doesn't know what's happened, but he knows something has happened, and it's impacting him very heavily. And so these sequences with Padme and Anakin are particularly good as far as building on that idea that there is this bridge, there is this connection, and like you said, slowing it down a little bit. There's a lot of action here. There's a lot of kind of high octane thrilling stuff that the moments that it slows down can be pretty interesting because those are deliberate choices. It's deliberately taking it back and trying to build up these scenes, and I think most of the slower scenes serve a pretty good purpose in that regard because they're designed to drop back, and I think this is a great example.
Andrew, we've discussed this month several times, and I know it came up whenever we had Brian on as our guest talking about episode 1, but in Star Wars, any character that just walks by in the background, has a Wikipedia page, has a backstory. General Grievous, pretty relatively major character in this movie, and I think they're in Clone Wars. I never watched the show. I know this character.
He actually shows up there first.
Oh, I thought the show came out. I know the show was set before episode 2 and 3. I didn't realize it actually aired before. Oh, there's an animated movie first that became the first season of the show. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, obviously, this character has a story I'm not aware of. But just from having watched this movie, this is all I really know about this character. To me, this is a robot with a cough, and I think that is hilarious. I think that is such a funny idea for a character. This character that's just a badass looking droid, but he's always hacking and wheezing. Very funny to me, Andrew.
Pretty good.
I don't want anybody to spoil it because I'm sure there's a big reason for that. I just think it's funny that a robot's coughing.
I agree, and I actually asked my brother. I was like, "Wait a second, why is this dude coughing?" And my brother was like, he's like, I don't know. But like, because I guess the implication is that he's a cyborg. So like, there's a human piece of him,
Right.
or at least a biological piece of him. And I guess when he got turned from a human into a cyborg, he had a cough. So now he's stuck with it, which is even funnier to me. Like, we basically RoboCopped this man, but couldn't get rid of his cough. Like, imagine if the
There's
whole
still
time
no
RoboCop
cure
was rolling
for the
around,
common cold.
He's like, dead or alive, you're coming with me. Like, it would be so much funnier. It's a very different movie, but yeah, I like the fact that he's literally coughing the whole time. It's so funny to me. But again, it makes, obviously the character would have stood out on his own, but it gives him an interesting wrinkle that like, okay, now I stands out even more to me now.
He's only got, I say he's in the movie, like it's really like 2 major scenes, and he gets dispatched of fairly early, but they do so much with it. He's got a cool look. We established the first time we see him that he collects lightsabers. There'll be a fine addition to my collection. He tries to steal a lightsaber, so that the next time we see him and it's time to fight, the reveal that he has, 6 arms and a lightsaber for each arm. What a cool idea. Like, it's not as cool, perhaps, as Darth Maul revealing the dual lightsaber. Like, you'll never be able to top that moment. But it's just another cool idea of something we've never seen before. Someone with a ton of arms, they can wield a ton of lightsabers. Awesome. I love that he's a robot, so he can move them with such precision. He obviously does like the spinny thing with a lot of them. I love that fight as Obi-Wan just knocks off limb after limb. And then, that final reveal where you see like inside his ribcage are still like organs, and they do that close up of his eye where it seems to be some kind of organic matter around his eye. So I assume he was alive fully at one point, but we don't dive into it this movie. It's just that great thing Star Wars does, that just a lived in world with these characters with histories where even if we don't dive into the history, we get enough to know that there's a story there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think that's great. I think I think this is a great example of that. Obviously, there is more to this character. If you want to go find out, I assume through both Clone Wars series, you can find out what his deal is. But yeah, the information you get here is just enough to make it interesting. It's kind of like Boba Fett. Like, you don't find out anything about Boba Fett in Episode 5. Like, you don't know what this dude's deal is. You have no idea. But you look at him and you're like, that dude's cool.
It's badass. Yeah. Also, Obi-Wan rides a dragon. Just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Pretty early in this movie, the opening of the movie is... Do they call it a dogfight still when it's in outer space?
Sure.
Outer space dogfight, which I realized, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time we've seen that in the prequel trilogy. I feel like that's such a big part of Star Wars. Like, I feel like in the original trilogy, these are more prominent than lightsaber duels. Like, dogfights with TIE fighters and, the trench run, obviously, and X-Wings. I think
you get it a little bit in Episode 1 with him going up to the ship and blowing up the shield generator.
Yeah, I guess.
A little bit.
You're in outer space, level, but it's not just a bunch of single pilot.
I mean, he's got the Naboo fleet. He's got the Naboo guys with him. He's got those people with him too. But
yeah,
there's like 4 different things going on there during that sequence. Because like in Episode 1, it's the lightsaber fight, the droid battle in the field, infiltrating the palace, and also Anakin blowing up the shield runner. So it's just not given a lot of focus. Whereas this is the scene. This is it.
Yeah.
Very similar to like Episode 4 with the trench run, where that is what's happening. There is nothing else to cut to. This is what we're watching. So I think, yeah. So it's definitely, I think, the first movie where it goes like super hard on it, because Episode 2 really doesn't. Not really. No.
Yeah, it's classic Star Wars thing. Makes zero sense because in outer space, how do we all agree which direction is down, which one is up? Doesn't matter. It looks awesome. And they get a lot of cool moments out of it. We've seen tons of ships get blown up in space, but I think this is the first time a ship gets blown up and you see the pilot flying out in space. Like, you see the person. It's kind of dark and crazy, pretty wild, yeah. But like, I guess they're like, we're getting PG-13 on this one. We're gonna push it a little bit, do some stuff you haven't seen before.
Push it.
R4 gets taken out, which is very sad. R4, we hardly knew thee.
Yep.
I love the little character moment though, where Anakin is trying to help get those little buzz bots or whatever they call those little robots off of Obi-Wan's ship. So he's trying to shoot him off, but he keeps shooting Obi-Wan's ship, and Obi-Wan says, "Hold your fire, you're not helping." And Anakin says, "I agree, bad idea." It's just, I love that. Like, Anakin doesn't like fight him. Like, I was only trying to help. He's like, "Nah, you're right. Yeah, I messed up. Okay."
Yeah, that's my bad. This one's on me.
My bad.
All right, everybody, it's my mistake. All good. Yeah, this whole opening sequence is just really, it's a great way to open the movie. You've got this dogfight that kind of gives way to this chase sequence that ultimately builds to that lightsaber fight with Obi-Wan and Anakin versus Count Dooku round, part 2, with Palpatine kind of in the background. The whole purpose of this mission is to rescue Chancellor Palpatine from General Grievous. They managed to do that. And in another moment of like building Anakin towards this turn, he cuts off both of Dooku's hands, and Dooku is defeated. But the Palpatine basically is like, kill him.
He cuts off both of his hands, and now he can no longer count.
I hate you. Anyway, so Palpatine encourages it, and ultimately Anakin gives in and uses Dooku's own lightsaber to assist in beheading him, and then throws it away. Doesn't keep it. Like, it's pretty cool, man. Anyway, it is a cool sequence. The lightsaber fight's cool. Another, like I said, we get to see Christopher Lee be awesome for a good few minutes here as they kind of battle back and forth, and then ultimately, like I said, it's a big moment, killing Dooku, because that it takes out Palpatine's apprentice, which is kind of what Palpatine's move always was, is Sidious's kind of repeated move was to never let his apprentices surpass him. And so losing Dooku and gaining Anakin is the whole point. So he sets up Dooku to be killed. And it succeeds. And then that starts the path of pulling Anakin to his side. I'll talk a little bit more about Palpatine's weirdness when I get to the Plagueis scene. But the way this all unfolds, very cool. A little bit of echoing of the first of episode 1, where they're kind of running through the Trade Federation ship, running into droids, doing all their stuff, but get some added pieces here, some additional lightsaber fights, added Christopher Lee, which is never a bad thing, but just makes for a really, like I said, thrilling opening to this movie.
One of my notes, and just channeling Clark Duke from Superbad, holy shit, R2's a badass. That moment where those guards like have him surrounded, and at first he's just doing silly antics, like he shoots some oil out and they slip, but then he uses his jets to escape it, and his jets set the oil on fire, thus burning those guys. I was like, oh my god, R2. I love that little guy.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
They get so much emotion and characterization out of the beeps and boops. I mean, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said a million times for the last 40 years, but I love how much they get out of. Never sad to see R2. I'm glad he's in all the movies. My favorite, I never get tired of hearing him go, wow! Oh, I hurt my throat trying to do it. Wow. When he says wow.
Oh, man.
Let me take it again. When he goes,
Chris, that was spot on. Great job.
Nailed it. First try.
Yeah, they do. R2, there's a lot of comedy. Like he's basically like a slapstick comedy character a lot of the time. Like the type of stuff he does is like just, old silent comedy. That's what he does. But they add in the noises, and it's definitely something where they get a lot of mileage out of limited ability to communicate. And they also get a little bit, obviously, when he interacts with C-3PO and he says something and 3PO's like, what? Get your kind of almost Laurel and Hardy type thing back and forth with them, which is it works. It's very effective. I mentioned it, so I'm just going to talk about it now, but we'll talk about the Darth Plagueis scene. This is another one of the quiet moments in this movie where we slow things down. This is when
we're watching Circus Soleil in space.
It's just wild. Is this entertainment? Is he watching this for fun?
It's like three. A I was trying. I was trying to okay, what is this? What is it's like 3 orbs of water, and they're like these water serpents that jumping from bubble to bubble. Like it was wild. It kind of reminded me of the that thing from Futurama where you play with your emotions.
Yeah,
is that right? It forms the shapes or whatever. That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah. Anyway, this is after Palpatine has basically told the Jedi Council that Anakin is a member of it. They don't make Anakin a Jedi Master, and they don't really trust Palpatine, so they basically ask Anakin to spy on Palpatine, and so he goes to see Palpatine while he's watching this Windows 98 screensaver performance live in person. And Palpatine
come back
can
next
tell
week
that,
and you can watch
Anakin's
Green Hills.
But it is it's another one of those quiet moments. They slow it down. Palpatine's kind of talking to him and kind of is at this point building and kind of telling him I feel like you've been asked to do something you don't want to do, something this, and he kind of cops to the truth of what the Jedi Council asked him to do and that they don't really are trusted. And another memeable moment from this movie, Palpatine basically looks at Anakin and goes, "Has anyone ever told you the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise? It's not a story a Jedi would tell you." But this is another interesting thing because this is kind of another key moment. Mace Windu isn't dead yet. This is before this happens. Another key moment because he's playing to what Anakin wants to hear because he knows what Anakin wants to hear, and he tells him that Darth Plagueis had basically discovered the way to stop people from dying using what Plagueis did and how he accomplished it changes depending on what version of events we're looking at. I'm actually not entirely sure what his story is now, but there was a story at a time, probably during the expanded universe, where Plagueis is actually alive during the events of Phantom Menace because he is actually responsible for the plan to get Palpatine into the Senate. That's part of his plan. And then ultimately Palpatine co-opts that for himself. But the implication seemed to be that Plagueis was kind of doing his own thing. Palpatine was rising up, had already taken on Darth Maul, and then at some point during the events of Phantom Menace, Palpatine kills Plagueis. And this is kicks us off, and then at that point, it's Sidious and Maul. But it is a very interesting conversation. He plays to this idea that Plagueis had just mastered this, and that he knows that basically the dark side of the Force is going to give him things the Jedi can't. And he's putting all those seeds, he's planting all those seeds, and he's waiting them to grow into a plant. And this plant grows fast, let me tell you. But it is a really interesting scene. Obviously, it's been kind of memed. You know, it's where the gif of him going ironic and all that stuff comes from, where like he's just telling this story. And again, just playing to what Anakin wants to hear at this point, that through the dark side of the Force, he can save Padme from these troubling visions he's having. Again, not aware at all that by accepting Sidious's offer and falling to the dark side, he is actually causing the events that will lead to Padme passing. Whereas if he had killed Sidious, none of it would have happened. The dark side of the Force is mysterious, friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Like
no notes.
At some point, okay, there's kind of this. I'm just gonna jump into it here. We've talked a lot about like the first half of this movie, a lot of cool action scenes. I feel like the reputation of this movie, like I said, it's arguably the most popular of the original trilogy, and everyone, it's just Vader's finally get to see Darth Vader. It's badass. This one's so dark. It's so cool. There's great lightsaber battles, and I'm not mocking that opinion or anything, but I think that's just like the reputation of this movie, and that's kind of how it sat in my mind. Like it was. I probably would have said it was my favorite original three. I don't know where my ranking is right now, but I was like, yeah, they really, stick the landing. They finally deliver. Watching it for this podcast this week, I didn't come away with that was badass, or even that was a ton of fun. It's just so incredibly sad. It
is
like crushed me watching this, and we got a few things going on here. First of all, over the course of 3 movies, we watched this political drama play out where one man seeks to gain power over an entire democracy through lies and misinformation, and there's parallels that are just tough to watch right now. We're not diving into it. You know what I'm talking about. It
very topical.
Exactly fun to watch. Yeah, quite topical.
A little too real.
We had election results recently, so that scene where Padme is like, "So this is how liberty dies," with thunderous applause. Gosh, it stings, and
best not to think about it too much.
Going through the Wikipedia, and there's a whole section about how upon release, people viewed it as potentially an attack on George Bush, and then George Lucas says, well, it's more about Vietnam. So I mean, it's obviously can be applied to many different things, and it's just you're probably going to apply it to the most recent or most topical political landscape. I get that. Moving beyond all that, though, there's just nothing to cheer about in the second half of this movie. Anakin falls to the dark side. He kills younglings, which I remembered.
Oh, man.
We all know the scene where he ignites the lightsaber. You see the kid's reaction, like, man, that's dark. They don't show anything, but you know what happens. There's a scene in the Jedi Temple after that where Yoda and Obi-Wan meet up, surrounded by dead kids. They're just, the body is laid around. They have a whole dialogue scene. I'm like, good Lord, this is so dark. So I don't mean this as a negative at all, by the way, because George Lucas has described this as a tragedy, as like a Greek tragedy, as a romantic tragedy. Brother, you succeeded. Like it is The sadness of it all hit me so hard. And so because I was so in tune with that, it really sucked out any kind of like fun or badassery it might have taken away from it. It's just a downer. I mean, these it's the end of a trilogy, so you have like the classic thing where it's like 10 endings all lined up, and each one is just like, yep, that's sad. That's sad. Oh, that's horrible. Oh, Padme's dying. Okay, that's awful. The kids are getting separated. Like, it's just, man, it's brutal. And like, credits it, and you get like the classic Star Wars.
Can we go back to when Obi-Wan killed Grievous so I can feel something good for once?
Yeah. Andrew,
Even
I don't know.
That is like brutal. Like, what? Anyway, continue. Sorry.
I don't know how much of this is my current headspace watching this movie, or the fact that, I don't know, maybe like, I'm a parent now and I wasn't last time I watched it. I'm just older, like just, come to a different perspective. But it hit me in a way that it did not previously. And again, this isn't good or bad, better or worse. It's just, I was just struck so much by how damn sad this movie is. First and foremost, when I think Star Wars, I think fun and a good time. This isn't the episode I point to for that, though.
Yeah, it's a I don't know what the way to put it is, but like you think about it just from the perspective of like, it's. I think episode 1 is more fun to watch, in as much as it doesn't make me feel sad as much as this one does. Because like obviously there's still some emotional beats there, like when he leaves his mom and things like that. But like overall, the action in that movie is good. The good guys largely win. Obviously some tragedy along the way, but the overall ending of episode 1 is mostly optimistic, with the dark cloud knowing what's coming. Whereas with episode 2 and episode 3, you're starting to get more into that. And by the end of episode 3, you're just like, ugh. Well, everything's terrible. So you're just like, well, where do we go now? But it is this movie is brutal. It really is. It is got a lot going on. Like I said, there's pretty much like a moment halfway. It's pretty much from the moment like Grievous dies on that it pretty much just devolves into sadness. Where like basically Grievous is killed by Obi-Wan, which I mentioned that's a brutal death. It really is. Basically, Obi-Wan just shoots his human parts with a laser and they like burst into flame.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty gnarly. Like he's literally like flaming out through the eyes of this droid mask he has on. And I'm just like, whoa. Yikes. Yeah, man, and lava sauce. But
I love the little line where he shoots him with a blaster, kills him, and then he throws it to the side and says, so uncivilized. Like, Jedi don't use guns. But, I mean, you just did. You just did. It kind of just saved your butt there.
You just did. Yeah, can't really fault it too much there. It just did exactly what it was supposed to do. I like the implication that killing people with swords is more civilized.
There's honor in that.
Like, if you're not killing a man with a laser sword, yeah, you gotta... takes guts to stab someone, doesn't it? You really got to want to do it if you want to stab somebody. But it's that whole sequence is like, but yeah, I mean, overall, like I said, from that moment on, that's basically when Palpatine's true nature is revealed. If you haven't been paying attention, it's when the characters. Also, earlier on when you were talking about how they don't know that Palpatine's the Emperor, but we do, you missed a prime opportunity to do not only did I know that, but I knew you'd know that I know you knew. I was like, but I didn't. I only knew that you knew I knew. Of course.
Honestly,
did you know that?
I had that in my brain, but I couldn't even fake it to I was genuinely. I'm sure I cleaned it up in editing, so they don't know what we're talking about. But I kind of got tripped up trying to even express that sentiment.
Yeah. But literally in that moment, I just wanted to be like, but I didn't. I only knew that you knew that I knew. Did you know that? Of course. Anyway, yeah, from Grievous's death on, the movie's just like, that's when Palpatine is revealed. That's when Mace Windu dies. That's when Kit Fisto, is that his name?
Yeah, the
gnarly dude
guy?
that we didn't talk about in episode 2.
Yeah,
he dies. I'm not gonna lie, the sequence where Mace Windu faces the Emperor, #PP, those other Jedi, kind of useless. Like they watch this dude draw a lightsaber, light it up, literally flips over, and then they just like let him stab them. Like they don't even try to stop him. Like it's like you could just do anything. My boy Fisto does get some moves in before he ultimately gets killed too, though. But I was just like, come on, guys! Like you literally are watching him jump at you with a lit lightsaber. You could show some energy, pull it together, guys. You're Jedi, for God's sake. But it's I do like that Mace Windu Sidious fight, since we're kind of winding it down. But this is another one where like it's a cool fight. Obviously, Sidious is very good at this, but we get to see Windu doing a little bit more than just fighting droids. He gets to have a one-on-one fight with somebody, and he's winning. Like, that's the thing I like about this. Mace Windu is beating Sidious.
Yeah.
Like, until the end. It takes Anakin interfering for Sidious
he's willing to kill him, no less. Like, he's willing to, like, go all the way. Anakin tries to use, like, the not the Jedi way, because he selfishly wants Palpatine alive for his own
selfish reasons, but yeah.
Exactly. But, like, Windu is like, no, you don't, like, this guy, this is worth
this dude's
crossing
bad.
the line for. Yeah.
We leave this dude alive, it's going to be bad news for all of us. So, but yeah, that's the thing I like about it's kind of like Dooku. Dooku against Obi-Wan and Anakin the first time, like, Dooku wins that fight, like, decisively, like, with no issue, which shows, again, despite this characters being the ones we know, it's, again, a clear way to show that Dooku is not to be messed with. He knows his stuff, and this scene works the same way for me. Like, we've been presented and semi-shown how badass, how awesome Mace Windu is and how good of a Jedi he is, but we've never really been shown it necessarily, and this is the moment where it is. Like, Sidious, and you could say that maybe Sidious is sandbagging this a little bit, trying to get Anakin to kind of take that final step, but I don't know. I still like to think that Mace Windu's just got the edge, and Sidious is kind of desperate, but Sidious is banking on Anakin, all the seeds that he's planting with Anakin, being enough to make Anakin step in and take him out, because now it's Mace Windu off the table. Doesn't have to worry about him interfering later. And now he's all scarred and everything, so that he can go to the Senate and be like, look what they did to me. It's very effective. It serves a lot of purposes. But I do like seeing Mace Windu basically be like, this guy ain't nothing.
It's good.
It took two of you to beat me.
There's a lot of good Yoda moments. Gotta shout out. He had the great fight in the last movie. Now's a good time as any to say this movie looks great. By the way, like it has aged pretty well for the time it came out, and the leap from episode 2 to episode 3 is insane.
Unbelievable.
Like, color wise, it looks great. Our palette's back on track. CG has aged well. They're using it really well. Like, even characters, like, in the very beginning, like, Obi-Wan's ship crashes, and as it's crashing, he leaps out, 10 feet in the air and lands. Looks awesome. I know it's a CG double, but it looks so good compared to that, man, like, that 99 to 2003, very tight era of CG doubles. It's your Daredevil, your Spider-Man, your Matrix 2. It was rough. But this is, like, just out of that area. And anyway, I think the effects here, by and large, tremendously hold up. I really like the way this movie looks. Yoda looks great. The CG Yoda is a big improvement, but a lot of cool moments. You get to see Yoda riding on a Wookiee, which is adorable. They do work in Wookiees here. You get to have Peter Mayhew in this movie, technically, which is awesome. And again, I praised this earlier this month, but I like that these movies will introduce characters or concepts that we are familiar with as an audience, but the movie isn't making it a big deal. Like, there's not a big moment where Chewbacca walks in the room and the camera slowly pans up and the music swells. It's just, there's Chewbacca. He's a character. He's in this world. You know who he is, but the movie doesn't stop and draw attention to it. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I agree.
I got more Yoda, don't worry. During one of the lightsaber battles, Yoda throws his lightsaber like a spear into the chest of I guess it's a clone. Is it a clone at that point? Into an enemy. I don't remember who he's fighting. He throws it into the chest, runs up their body, and then pulls it out of his chest and keeps fighting with it. Awesome. Cool. Love that. Very cool. And then Yoda versus Palpatine. This is a long, extended lightsaber battle We got Yoda versus Dooku in the last movie. This one's even longer. You get Yoda twirling around in a little ball. It's awesome. It's great. I love that they fight in the, what is it? The Senate room. What do you call that? The chambers, Senate chambers with, where the Senate meets. And Andrew, if you notice, Palpatine starts throwing the booths at Yoda. He is literally disassembling the Senate in his fight with Yoda. How about that?
Noticed that, did you?
I did. That was a nice little touch. And, of course, after Order 66. All these characters that we're familiar with, they got to go into their place that makes sense for Episode 4. Yoda says, "Into exile I must go. Failed I have." And no one complains that a Jedi would never do that, or that it's not in his characterization. It makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's actually, I think, a really cowardly moment from Yoda that he just gives up and goes into exile. Just really shows that whoever wrote and directed this movie doesn't have any real understanding of how these characters work.
Yoda should have pulled the X-Wing out of that swamp himself and flown it over to the Death Star and cut Vader's head off. Wouldn't that have been a better, satisfying ending to the original trilogy than having...
It would have been.
All right, come on.
All right, we've had our fun.
We had our fun. We had our fun.
Yes.
Last thing I got here, Andrew. During one of our final shots, we've got Darth Vader and the Emperor overlooking the Death Star being assembled, and a man that looks strikingly like Peter Cushing is standing next to him, and then walks off screen. How did they find someone that looks like Peter Cushing? Because that is a unique looking individual, but that guy looked like him enough that you go, I know who that is.
Yep, yeah. And, props, because that is, it's pretty good. It's one of those moments where I'm like, nailed it, guys, first try.
Andrew, I'm sure I've said it earlier on other episodes this month, but I'm just kind of in the Star Wars mood now. Like, there's all these Disney Plus shows that I was just like, I don't have time to watch all this, but kind of want to jump into one. I might pop into Obi-Wan, or maybe watch even like Andor. I've heard is really good. I'm kind of feeling the Star Wars thing. I figure I should capitalize on this while I'm in the zone. I've even had a chance to, Blank Check Podcast, which I've talked about before, and if you're listening to us, you probably know who they are. Great movie podcast. They started as a Star Wars prequel podcast. Essentially, they watched the prequels starting episode 1 and recorded 10 episodes, breaking it down, trying to figure out what it was about, and sort of the gimmick was they pretended it was the only Star Wars movie to exist, and how does it stand on its own? Any rate, I never listened to those episodes. I liked it once they changed the format, but now that they're all fresh on my mind, I've been binging those early episodes, and it's a lot of fun. I'm feeling the Star Wars right now.
Cool. I would suggest Obi-Wan.
Well, I think I will do. I think I'll do that, Andrew. And
I thought you said, I'm going to do Andor, but
well, maybe I'll do both. Maybe I'll get crazy and watch more than one show.
Andrew, I'm offended you suggested that to me.
We have had some people in the Discord write in with their positive thoughts. We haven't had a chance to get all these into the actual bodies of our episodes. Don't want to, let you peek too far behind the curtain here, but sometimes we record things early or out of order. But look, we get all of your messages here. We want to make sure we acknowledge them. So Roland on the Discord wrote in. Spoiler, this is friend of the show, Brian Keese, but a friend of the show, guest from episode 1. And they wanted to share their positive thoughts on Star Wars Episode 2. And they say, Mark Strong Award, I want to give it to the Nexu, but since you already let me have a little Mark Strong Award for Maul's lightsaber, I'll stick to actors this time and go with Samuel L. Jackson. Andrew, I just watched all these movies. The Nexu. I don't even know what he's making some sort of reference here that I don't understand already. Do you know what the Nexu is from episode 2?
The Nexu?
Nexu. Oh, okay. It's one of the monsters.
It's
from
weird.
the
It's the weird cat creature.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That is a pretty cool design.
Nerd.
But the going with Samuel L. Jackson. I think folks were really excited for him to be in these films, and he gets only a scene or two in Phantom Menace. Not that he has a ton more time here, but it's more impactful, especially the entrance into the arena towards the climax of the film. His decapitation of Jango Fett will always be one of the most metal things to ever happen in Star Wars. I agree, pretty rad. Best scene, you gotta love an all hope seems lost. Here comes the cavalry moment when done well, and it is here. This was the promise of the prequels delivered. Hundreds of Jedi and clone troopers fighting side by side. The Jedi Order in its full glory, pride before the fall, for the first time on screen. Runner-up is the Yoda fight for sure. When I saw this film, I went with my dad, his buddy, and his buddy's kid, who was like 7 or 8 at the time. When Yoda ignited his lightsaber, the kid involuntarily started yelling, "Yoda, Yoda, Yoda," at the screen. A sentiment I think we were all feeling, and he vocalized perfectly. It's Yoda, 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 all caps, no spaces in between. I'm not sure exactly how the kid blurted that out, but I do love that energy in a movie theater with the involuntary responses. Yeah, fantastic.
I mean, like I said, the Yoda thing is definitely how we all felt watching that for the first time. And if you suggest otherwise, I know you're lying.
Groffles has written in with his positive thoughts on Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. For them, the Mark Strong Award goes to Natalie Portman. And he says, let's be real. The emotional core of this film is Padme, and Natalie Portman is an amazing actress. Her subjected to betrayal from Anakin, her giving birth to twins, and dying as a result of childbirth or a broken spirit is a heart-wrenching story to watch unfold. Viewing the entire film from her perspective adds so much weight, and it is what I remember most of the movie. As I've said, I like my lightsaber battles, but this time, it's not my favorite scene. My favorite scene has to be the moment of confrontation between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme on the volcanic mining derelict. It's not a very positive feeling moment, but it gives so much emotional resonance with this film, and certainly how I remember it most. It wraps up everything we needed this movie to be, which is the fall of Anakin, the failure of Obi-Wan, and breaking Padme, so the story can move onward with the next trilogy. Very strong runner-up scene is the lore expansion with Palpatine. It's nice to get more lore, and Ian McDiarmid is always super fun to see, relishing his role as Palpatine. It is certainly a good time when he goes full Sith, full evil, full high-pitched weird voice. I just want to backtrack a little bit. The failure of Obi-Wan. This is something I don't think we really got into, but do you see this movie as Obi-Wan failing to rein in Anakin or train him properly? Like, is this like Anakin was always gonna be turned evil, or like could maybe a better master have kept him on the right side?
I don't know. I've never really seen it as a failure. I kind of saw this as inevitable. And it's kind of, you know, Qui-Gon got told early on, we won't allow you to train the boy. And it's the irony of the fact that by forcing it and saying, I'm going to train him anyway, it's what brings this all to pass. This feels to me like something that was always going to happen. If you frame it like that, like fate, destiny, whatever, the prophecy, it is what it is. But I don't see it as Obi-Wan failing necessarily. I don't think there's anything he could have done. The only thing you really could have done would have been to leave him on Tatooine, because then he never gets involved with any of it. Does it unfold differently? Who knows? Who knows?
Well, I'm sure there's some sort of fan fiction out there that can fill in those gaps. If you're wondering about the alternate,
There's definitely fan fiction that fills in some gaps, but it ain't those ones.
Thank you for writing in with your positive thoughts, and please continue to do so where we don't feature episodes. If you want to know what movies we have coming up, of course, you can hop into that Discord server. There's a link in our show notes. Come and join us. What are you waiting for? We have one more week of Star Wars prequel month. We are not done. Next week, we will be talking all about Solo, a Star Wars story. Andrew, do you know it's a Star Wars story? The movie called Solo about a young Han Solo? It's a Star Wars story.
I thought it was about red cups.
Star Wars story. I'm excited to jump in. Never seen it. Excited to jump into it. I've heard here's my perception of that movie. It gets announced and everyone kind of goes, okay, I guess. Like, we like Han Solo, but this seems unnecessary. It kind of quietly comes and goes, and everyone was like, actually, that was pretty fun. But they're not going to make more of them because they didn't make a lot of money. Does that sound about like they got my finger on the pulse of that one, Andrew?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, we'll talk about it a little bit more next week, but I think that was the general feeling was... I don't know that anybody was convinced that it was necessary after watching it, but I think the general consensus is that it was better than expected. Given the kind of... the onus of having someone else play Han Solo. But
sure. Well, I look forward to diving into it next week. Come back then, and just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter. I'm the Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some best of the rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.